There are nights in the emergency room that change everything you thought you knew about your job. Nights when a small detail, something most people would miss, becomes the difference between life and death. I am about to share with you the most extraordinary case of my entire career. A case involving a dying Marine, a hidden tattoo, and secrets that had been buried for years. What started as just another shift became a race against time that nobody saw coming. And I was the one who found the only clue that could save him. My name is Helena Morrison, and I have been working as an emergency room nurse at Mercy General Hospital in San Diego, California, for almost 12 years now. San Diego is a coastal city with a strong military presence, where the Pacific Ocean breeze mixes with the everyday hustle of a metropolis that never sleeps. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, but I moved here right after nursing school, drawn by the promise of challenges and the diversity of cases that a city like this offers. My days are long and unpredictable. One moment, I am treating a surfer with a jellyfish sting. The next, I am helping save someone from a severe car accident. Over the years, I have learned to keep my emotions in check, to stay focused even when chaos surrounds me. But there are cases that break through that armor, cases that remind you why you chose this profession in the first place. It was a Friday night in late September when everything changed. The emergency room was packed, as it always is on weekends. Ambulances came and went, sirens wailing, bringing in patients from accidents, overdoses, heart attacks. Around 11:30 at night, paramedics rushed in with a man on a stretcher. He had been in a serious car accident on the interstate. No identification on him, no wallet, no phone, nothing. He was unconscious, bleeding heavily from head trauma, with multiple fractures and internal injuries. We immediately started working on him, but from the beginning, something felt off. He had no one, no emergency contact, no way to know who he was, and as the hours passed, his condition only got worse. If this story has already grabbed your attention, go ahead and subscribe to the channel now, because what comes next will surprise you even more. The first 72 hours were critical. We stabilized him as best we could, but he remained in a coma. The medical team ran every test imaginable, trying to figure out his identity while simultaneously fighting to keep him alive. I was assigned to his care during my shifts, which meant I spent hours by his bedside, monitoring vitals, changing dressings, administering medications. It was frustrating. How could someone just appear out of nowhere with no trace of who they were? We checked missing persons reports, reached out to local shelters, even ran his fingerprints through the system, but nothing came up. He was a ghost. As the days went by, I started noticing small details about him. The way his hands were calloused, like someone who had done hard physical labor. The scars on his body, some old and faded, others more recent. There was something about him that suggested a difficult life, a life marked by struggle. My colleagues started referring to him as John Doe, but I refused to call him that. To me, he was a person with a story, a name, a family somewhere who might be looking for him. I felt a growing sense of responsibility, almost an obsession, to figure out who he was. On the fourth day, his condition deteriorated. His blood pressure dropped dangerously low, and we had to move him to the intensive care unit. The doctors were running out of options. Without knowing his medical history, we were essentially working blind. Any medication we gave him could potentially cause a fatal reaction if he had allergies we did not know about. It felt like we were losing him, and there was nothing we could do. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about him, about the life he might have lived, about the people who might be missing him. I made a decision then. I was going to find out who he was, no matter what it took. Thank you for staying with me this far. It shows that you feel the same thing I felt when I lived through all of this. So go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications, because what comes next changes everything. Chapter 3. The breakthrough came on my next shift, almost a week after he had been admitted. I was in his room doing a routine dressing change on a wound on his upper left chest. As I carefully removed the old bandages, I noticed something I had not seen before. There, partially hidden by the injury and the surgical tape, was a tattoo. Not just any tattoo. It was an intricate military emblem, detailed and professional, clearly done by someone who knew what they were doing. The design included an eagle, an anchor, and a globe. I recognized it immediately. It was the emblem of the United States Marine Corps. But there was more. Below the emblem were numbers that looked like coordinates, and a series of letters that seemed to be some kind of unit designation. My heart started racing. This was it. This was the clue we had been looking for. I quickly took photos of the tattoo with my phone and called over Dr. Patterson, the attending physician. He examined it closely, his expression shifting from curiosity to recognition. He had served in the Army before becoming a doctor, and he understood the significance of what we were looking at. We immediately contacted the nearest Marine Corps base, Camp Pendleton, which was about 40 miles north of San Diego. I explained the situation to the officer who answered, describing the tattoo in detail, giving them the coordinates and unit letters. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then the officer asked me to send the photos immediately. Within 20 minutes, they called back. They had identified him. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this story from? Write it in the comments. It is incredible to see people from so many places following stories like this. Tatianam, his name was Marcus Dillon Reeves, and his story was more complicated than any of us could have imagined. He was a decorated Marine Corps veteran who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan between 2008 and 2014. He had been part of an elite reconnaissance unit, which explained the coordinates tattooed on his chest. They marked a location where his unit had carried out a dangerous mission that saved dozens of lives. After his final tour, Marcus had returned home with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, but he had refused most treatment. According to military records, he had become increasingly isolated, cutting ties with his family and fellow veterans. 2 years ago, he had stopped reporting to mandatory medical checkups and had essentially disappeared off the grid. The Marines had listed him as a deserter who had voluntarily separated from society. The military sent over his complete medical file within hours, and what we found there made my blood run cold. Marcus had multiple severe allergies to common medications, including a life-threatening allergy to a specific class of antibiotics. We checked his current medication list, and my hands started shaking. He was scheduled to receive that exact antibiotic in less than 3 hours as part of his treatment for a developing infection. If we had administered it, he would have gone into anaphylactic shock and almost certainly died. The tattoo had not just helped us identify him, it had saved his life. Dr. Patterson immediately adjusted the treatment plan, switching to alternative medications that were safe for Marcus. We also learned that he had a rare blood type and specific protocols for pain management due to his combat injuries. Everything changed in that moment. We were no longer treating an unknown patient. We were treating a war hero who had given years of his life serving his country, only to come home and struggle in silence. 2 Marine Corps officers arrived at the hospital the following morning. They were respectful and professional, but I could see the weight of the situation in their eyes. They brought additional medical records, personal effects that had been stored in a military facility, and contact information for Marcus's family. One of the officers, a Captain Rodriguez, pulled me aside. He thanked me for finding the tattoo and said that Marcus was one of the best Marines he had ever served with. He explained that Marcus had witnessed things in Afghanistan that no one should have to see. His unit had been ambushed during one of their missions, and Marcus had lost several close friends. The coordinates on his tattoo marked the exact location where they had fallen. It was his way of carrying them with him always. Captain Rodriguez also told me that Marcus had been struggling with survivor's guilt, a common but devastating condition among combat veterans. He had pushed everyone away because he felt he did not deserve to be alive when his brothers in arms were not. He had been living on the streets for the past year, moving from city to city, trying to outrun his memories. The accident that brought him to our hospital had happened because he had fallen asleep at the wheel of a borrowed car, exhausted and malnourished. With the new medications and proper treatment, Marcus's condition began to improve. His vital signs stabilized, the infection was brought under control, and slowly, very slowly, he started showing signs of waking up. I found myself spending more time in his room than necessary, talking to him even though he could not hear me. I told him about the search to find his identity, about the tattoo that saved him, about the officers who had come to see him. I do not know why I did it. Maybe I hoped that somewhere deep down, he could hear me. Maybe I just needed to tell someone, anyone, about how much this case had affected me. On the 10th day after his admission, Marcus opened his eyes. I was in the room checking his IV when I saw his eyelids flutter. I immediately called for Dr. Patterson, but I stayed right there, holding Marcus's hand. His eyes moved around the room, confused and disoriented. He tried to speak, but the breathing tube prevented it. We had to wait another day before the tube could be safely removed. When he finally could talk, his voice was rough and weak. The first thing he asked was where he was, and how long he had been there. I gently explained everything. The accident, the coma, the search for his identity. When I mentioned the tattoo, something changed in his expression. His eyes filled with tears, and he turned his face away from me. Over the next few days, as his physical strength returned, I witnessed the emotional and psychological battle he was fighting. He experienced intense flashbacks. Sometimes he would wake up screaming, convinced he was back in Afghanistan under enemy fire. Other times he would be completely silent, staring at nothing, lost in memories that tormented him. The hospital brought in a psychiatrist who specialized in treating veterans with PTSD. Dr. Sarah Brennan was patient and compassionate. And slowly, Marcus started opening up. He told us about the mission commemorated by his tattoo, how his team had been sent to extract a group of civilians trapped behind enemy lines, how they had succeeded but had been ambushed on their way back, how he had held his best friend, a Marine named Daniel, as he died in his arms. Marcus said the guilt had been eating him alive for years. He could not understand why he had survived when so many good men had not. He could not face his family because he felt like a failure, like he had let everyone down, so he had walked away from everything, choosing the streets over the painful memories that home represented. The conversations I had with Marcus during those weeks changed something in me. He was brutally honest about his struggles, about the nightmares that never stopped, about the constant feeling of being on edge, waiting for danger that never came. He told me about the sounds that triggered him. Fireworks that sounded like gunfire, cars backfiring that made him hit the ground, crowded places that made him feel trapped and vulnerable. He described the isolation he had chosen, not because he wanted to be alone, but because he felt too broken to be around normal people living normal lives. He said civilians could not understand what it was like to go to war, to see death up close, to make split-second decisions that determined who lived and who died, and he was tired of people thanking him for his service when they had no idea what that service had actually cost him. But he also told me about the good parts of being a Marine, the brotherhood, the sense of purpose, the pride in serving something bigger than himself. He said those were the best years of his life, despite the trauma. He missed the structure, the clear mission, the feeling that what he was doing mattered. I shared some of my own story with him too. I told him about growing up in Ohio, about losing my father to cancer when I was 16, about how that loss had driven me to become a nurse. I wanted to help people the way the nurses had helped my family during my father's final days. I told him that I understood feeling broken, feeling like life had taken more than it should have. Marcus looked at me with an intensity I will never forget and said that finding purpose in pain was the only way to survive it. He said that was what his tattoo meant to him. It was not just a memorial to his fallen friends. It was a reminder that their sacrifice had to mean something, that he had to find a way to live a life worthy of the second chance they never got. 3 weeks after Marcus woke up, the social worker finally tracked down his family. His mother, Grace Reeves, lived in Phoenix, Arizona. She had been searching for him desperately for 2 years, filing missing persons reports in multiple states, hiring private investigators, and never giving up hope that her son was alive somewhere. When she got the call that Marcus had been found, she drove straight through the night to get to San Diego. I was there when she arrived. Grace was a small woman in her early 60s with gray hair and eyes that looked like they had cried 1,000 tears. The moment she saw Marcus through the window of his hospital room, she collapsed. We had to help her to a chair. The reunion was not what anyone expected. When Grace entered the room, Marcus did not smile. He did not open his arms for a hug. He turned away and said he did not want her there. Grace started crying, begging him to talk to her, saying she had been looking for him everywhere, that she loved him and just wanted him to come home. But Marcus refused to look at her. He said he could not go back, that he was not the son she remembered, that it was better if she just left and forgot about him. The confrontation that followed was painful to witness. Grace demanded to know why he had abandoned his family, why he had let them suffer thinking he was dead. Marcus shouted back that he was dead, that the person who went to Afghanistan had never come back, that she was mourning someone who did not exist anymore. Then Grace said something that broke through his walls. She told him that his younger brother, Ethan, had died in a car accident 8 months ago. She said Ethan had spent his last years trying to find Marcus, wanting to tell him that he understood, that he did not blame him for anything. And now Ethan was gone, and Marcus had never gotten the chance to say goodbye. The news about his brother devastated Marcus. For days, he would not eat, would not speak to anyone. The guilt that had been consuming him for years intensified to unbearable levels. Dr. Brennan worked with him constantly, trying to prevent him from spiraling into a complete breakdown. Grace stayed in San Diego, refusing to leave even though Marcus would not see her. She would sit in the waiting area for hours, hoping he would change his mind. I found myself acting as a mediator between them, carrying messages back and forth. Slowly, very slowly, Marcus started asking questions about Ethan, how he had died, what his last years had been like, whether he had been happy. Grace told him everything through me. She said Ethan had joined the fire department and had become a paramedic, inspired by Marcus's service. He had saved dozens of lives before his own was cut short by a drunk driver. She said Ethan had always defended Marcus when other family members criticized him for disappearing. Ethan had insisted that Marcus was fighting his own battles and would come home when he was ready. Just when it seemed like Marcus might be ready to reconcile with his mother, a new crisis hit. He developed a severe post-surgical infection that the antibiotics were not controlling. His fever spiked dangerously high, and his white blood cell count indicated his body was losing the fight. We had to take him back into surgery to clean out the infected tissue. It was a risky procedure given his weakened state. There was a real possibility he might not survive. The night before the surgery, Grace was finally allowed into his room. I do not know what they said to each other, but when I checked on them an hour later, they were holding hands, both crying silently. The surgery lasted 6 hours. I was not on duty, but I came to the hospital anyway. I could not stay home not knowing whether Marcus would make it. Marcus survived the surgery, but his recovery was long and difficult. The infection had taken a serious toll on his body, and he had to learn to walk again, to regain his strength. But something fundamental had changed. He had decided to fight, not just for his physical health, but for his life, his future, his chance to honor the memory of his fallen brothers, and his lost brother Ethan. Grace moved to San Diego temporarily to be near him. They attended therapy sessions together, working through years of pain, misunderstanding, and missed connections. It was not easy. There were setbacks, arguments, days when Marcus wanted to give up again. But Grace never wavered. She was there every single day, reminding him that he was loved, that he was wanted, that he deserved to heal. 4 months after the accident that brought him to us, Marcus was discharged from the hospital. He was not the same man who had come in unconscious and unidentified. He had agreed to enter a Veterans Affairs treatment program that specialized in PTSD. He had reconnected with some of his Marine brothers who were also struggling. He had even started talking about maybe, someday, finding a way to help other veterans who were going through what he had been through. On his last day at Mercy General, Marcus asked to see me. When I came to his room, he hugged me tightly and said I had saved his life twice, once by finding the tattoo, and once by refusing to give up on him as a person. He said he would carry that with him, just like he carried the memory of his fallen brothers. I watched him leave the hospital with his mother, walking slowly but steadily toward the parking lot. That tattoo that I had almost missed, that small detail hidden under bandages and blood, had been the key to everything. It had revealed his identity, prevented a fatal medication error, and ultimately reconnected him with his family and his purpose. I still think about Marcus often. His case reminded me why I became a nurse in the first place, and why every patient deserves our full attention and care, no matter how hopeless their situation might seem. This is the story that changed how I see my profession, and reminded me that we should never give up on anyone. Have you ever experienced or known someone who went through something as unlikely as this? Has your life ever been saved by a small detail that nobody else noticed? I would love to hear your thoughts. If stories like this move you the way they moved me, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss more real stories from healthcare professionals who experience the extraordinary every single day. And do not forget to watch the next recommended video, where another nurse shares an even more surprising case. Thank you for being here with me through this journey.